So you might be wondering, who the heck do you think you are? That's a pretty reasonable question, given how Free has often been shilled as one of the best sports anime out there, a sentiment I wholeheartedly disagree with. Now, don't get me wrong, I really did like the writing of Free, especially the part where Haruka said the real relay was the friends we made along the way, while the friends we made along the way sat alone in the stands, but that's besides the point. While much of the writing was excellent, especially how the relationships were depicted, there are a few moments I can't condone as a reader, but even more so as a competitive swimmer. So, what's the big issue? What makes a story interesting? What makes you want to keep watching? The answer is emotional investment. When we watch sports anime, or really any story with stakes, we make an emotional investment on the main idea, whether that be a character or something else like an unanswered question. When this character goes through hardships, the emotional investment is increased, and thus our potential return is also increased. Whether they win or lose, we as the audience get some sort of return regardless. It should be pretty obvious that emotional investment is necessary for viewer engagement. What makes somebody want to invest in a character? The answer is human connection. The simple rundown is that human empathy allows you to set yourself in their shoes. If human connection is the prerequisite for emotional investment, then how human the characters are, that is, how realistically they are depicted, is how we measure how much we invest. Since Free is a sports series, if the characters achieve their goals too easily, we don't get that increase in investment that comes from struggle, and thus we invest less next time. This is the main problem I have with Free. Hey guys, training is hard, and welcome to the 4th layer of hell, early morning practices, where as punishment for your sins, you'll be forced to endure a 2-hour torture session. As an athlete of 10 years, I understand the amount of effort it takes to stand on the national stage. Anyone who's put any effort into anything should know the pulverizing grind that represents growth. Yet, none of that grind is shown in Free. The lifeblood of a sports story like Free is growth. At the beginning, we are presented with a supposed period of stagnation. 3 years of our protagonist, Haruka, scarcely swimming led to a lull in his skills. The inciting incident is when Haruka runs into Rin at their old pool. Events happen that lead to them racing, and obviously Rin, who has been training rigorously for the past 3 years, beats Haruka. From a writing perspective, it's the perfect setup. The stagnating protagonist reunites with an old rival who has outpaced him and is inspired to grow once more. Not only is there obvious conflict and a goal, there's also the underlying tint of old friendship. Sounds real touching. Except, why is the gap so narrow? A muscle will stagnate if it isn't used for 3 weeks, much less 3 years. Same goes for skills. Haruka, who hasn't touched a pool for years, doesn't have any right to be so close to Rin, who's been training for those same years. Sure, you can take this as me nitpicking, and maybe you'd be right. Unfortunately, the way that Free wants to quantify the value of the protagonist's effort only gets worse from here. Behold, the beauty-obsessed Rei, the newest addition to Iwatobi's swim club. Now, I can tolerate his cardboard character given his rich interactions with the rest of the team, but no matter their athletic ability, a beginner learning the most difficult stroke as his first one purely on the basis of a writing decision is downright disrespectful to people who actually had to struggle to earn what they have. I hope you understand what I meant by on the basis of a writing decision. Free thrives on the complex interactions between decidedly not-so-complex characters, rewarding the reader's emotional investment through character development as opposed to struggle. So what's the big deal? The big deal is that writing convenience is prioritized over realism. How so? Let's take a look. Rei was my segue into this point, so I'll start with him, and a rhetorical question. Have you ever tried cooking? You know the recipe, and understand the concepts involved. So why is it that a professional can do it so much better? The answer boils down to practical experience. It doesn't matter how much you know, only how well you can apply that knowledge. Theory plus application equals results. And that's where the convenience comes in. Rei doesn't possess the application necessary to achieve these results. The writers are leaning on his prior athletic ability and deep theoretical understanding, but those don't mean squat. He's out of his element. Story-wise, Rei is the 4th swimmer that allows them to get accepted as a club. He also has to replace Rin in more ways than one. Using a character who never knew the 4 main characters sets up a chain for all sorts of inciting events that represent the story's fuel. Except, why not just use an established swimmer from a different region? Rei's existence, and frankly the ability of this team to even compete at a regional level, are a slap in the face to anybody who's ever struggled to reach such a level. It makes no sense that after just a few months of training they can overcome 3 years of stagnation. It makes no sense that Rei, as a complete aquatic novice, can learn butterfly as his first stroke at all. A stroke so difficult that is excluded from lifeguarding and taught last to prospective competitive swimmers. That's just laziness on the part of the writers. Haruka's abstract monologue is about as useful as emotional baggage at a swim meet and doesn't even come close to the guidance of a real coach. Saying, "I can't explain it either" is frankly even worse. How any of this is remotely believable is beyond me. There's a reason most athletes who hope to rise start training at the tender age of around 5 years old, risking everything from present to future for the slim hopes of grasping an impossible dream. Sport is unpredictable and unforgiving, but in Free, it's just used as a vehicle to conveniently bring the main characters together, lacking any of the edge it has in literally any other sports series. The flippant nature with which Free treats competitive swimming is why I say and will stand by that it demeans the sport and the value of effort. Unfortunately, this isn't even the worst writing decision that was made this season. Of everything in the show, if I had to pick one thing to criticize, it would be this. While I can at least see the rationale behind the decision to make Rei a stand-in for Rin, the decisions made in this arc are blatantly unforgivable, taking the concept of demeaning the sport to the next level. Having been part of some frankly absurd excursions myself, I'll ignore the logistics of travel and camping on the beach and instead delve into how this entire training camp was honestly the most blatant example of prioritizing writing convenience over realism in this whole show. A quick recap. Rei, frustrated by his inability to keep up, goes out to train at night, only to be caught in an unexpected storm. Makoto, who has always suffered from the guilt of his own inability to protect what's dear to him, dives in, only to become the storm's second victim in his haste. Haruka dives in not long after, and Nagisa unwisely follows instead of going out for help. After Haruka and Nagisa successfully rescue the two victims, they all manage to wash up on one of the islands, along with Rei's lost board. See anything wrong yet? Lacking lifeguarding skills and proper equipment, the chances of the boys successfully all surviving that situation are about as much as Biden winning the next election. Victims easily make more victims in their panic, especially when their rescuers don't even know proper approaching technique. That's not even including the weather conditions. However, the writers throw in a deus ex machina to save them, conveniently overwriting the situation they'd placed the characters into while also effectively removing any consequences of their actions. Rei doesn't even lose his board, and even more conveniently, none of them suffer lasting effects that you might expect from, I don't know, inhaling water? It's pretty clear that this arc was really just used to lampshade Makoto's past, providing a convenient incident for him to open up to the rest of the group. Free might find both its strength and incentive in developing the relationships between characters, but this is just too much. In the past, people have written this and the other issues in the video off as minor and went on to say that a story having a perfectly accurate portrayal of the activities and events surrounding it can certainly be a boon, but often these can also get in the way of the story's key message, entertainment value, or pacing. I'm not asking for perfection. However, a little respect wouldn't hurt. It's obvious to any reader or writer that the quote-unquote rules of writing are more of loose guidelines than strict regulations, but there are always exceptions to any rule, or in this case, guideline. There have been, and will be, many stories, sports or otherwise, which use surrealism to their advantage to tell a more compelling story. However, if these stories wish to remain set in the real world, they make an effort to do so. Free doesn't make any of that effort, and consequently, the use of swimming in its story at all is literally redundant. That might be a hot take, but I'll stand by it. None of competitive swimming's unique traits are taken advantage of. Indeed, its uniqueness is straight up ignored. As it is right now, replacing swimming with anything from horse races to street brawls would be enough to keep the spirit of the story alive. Swimming only serves to bring the boys together, break them apart, and bring them together once more. In Free, it doesn't do so in such a way that justifies its presence in the story. So, what could be done to fix that? I believe that the entwining of sport with story is a topic best saved for another time, so I won't go into that here. However, there is much that could be done to improve the rest of the show. The issues outlined in this video only damage the realism of the story. Of course, that's a major concern for a story like this. Lowered realism contributes to unsatisfying stakes that incur lower emotional investment and thus reduce the quality of the story. However, since they only pertain to the realism, it doesn't take much to address said issues. For Rei, like I said earlier, it's enough to simply replace him with a sufficiently skilled swimmer from elsewhere, as long as he has no prior connection to the main characters. As the one who first criticizes the malfunctional relationship between the boys and Rin, much of his dynamic interactions are fueled by his sense of being an outsider. While being a novice to swimming certainly made him such an outsider, it's more important that he wasn't connected to them in childhood. It isn't really necessary to go that far to cement that he's outside the narrative the boys have paved thus far. As for the training camp, I have no words. Cutting out the rescue sequence and replacing it with a scene that invokes the same panic in Makoto could work just as well. The boys could then comfort him, leading to a scene in which he would be able to comfortably open up to them. Panic attacks don't need to be incited by such severe incidents, and that lousy method of building tension wasn't really doing much for the story anyway. Despite everything I've said, I don't think Free is particularly bad, even if when I first watched it I had to stop after episode 9 to avoid throwing up. Unfortunately for me, it just doesn't find its strengths in depictions of sports. If you enjoy it, that's great. I'm happy for you. However, I do hope you keep what I've said in mind. If you've made it this far, I'm sorry that you had to listen to my voice for this long. Now, if you don't mind, I'm gonna go free myself from this life.